start with our sense of touch. If there's a sensory glitch in our tactile system, in our sense of touch, children will respond by either seeking more or avoiding it completely. So when children seek touch, that's a child who's fidgeting a ton. And in classrooms, that often looks like the children who are human vacuum cleaners in the middle of circle time. If there is a piece of lint, a crumb, something, that child has it. Okay? It's also the child who is constantly fidgeting, or who is hugging too hard, or is leaning on the friend next to them. That's a child who's not having a great sense of their touch and is seeking more of it. For a child who is avoiding touch, in younger children, we often see children avoiding many centers. Okay, this is something that I see frequently in preschool classrooms, and I encourage preschool teachers to have children explore all the different centers. But it's the same kid who avoids any messy play. They're the kid who is fantastic at dress up and is always in the imaginary play section, or is always building great towers, but fails to ever hit the sand table, has never gone to the water table, is the first one finished with projects, or is carefully, dropping, like I said, the feather onto the glue, and is never getting dirty. Okay, so that's the child who's avoiding touch. Lots of times in older children, when that's not demanded of them, how do we see it? It's a child who has difficulty standing on line, in being close proximity to other children, is always late to class when the bell rings because they can't be in the hallway when everybody else is in the hallway. They're 2-3 minutes in between periods, and it's constantly bumping into everybody else. So they'll just be late. They'll take the tardy because they're just too uncomfortable to be in that confined space. If we talk about another sensory system, we're going to talk about our sense of sound, of hearing. For a child who seeks more sound, this is a child who's constantly humming and singing. Okay? At home, that might be fine during homework, but you might imagine that in the classroom, if your neighbor is humming or singing, that's often very distracted. It's very distracting to other children in the classroom. So it's a great coping mechanism when you're not around other people. For children, or another great example is we have what we often as parents call selective hearing, right? We know our children's hearing is intact, but they often seem to completely ignore our directions. Are they not hearing us? Are they being behavioral? Perhaps, but, right, especially with those 2- and 3-year-olds, but are they tuning into what we're hearing, right? It looks like they're ignoring our directions. Many times we see children who are hypersensitive to sound, and they avoid it. They're hearing too much sound. So what does it look like? It often looks like this. Right? We can do that sometimes. If there's a fire drill and we see kids walking out like this, that's considered pretty acceptable, right? Or another one with small children I find is they're afraid of the flush in public restrooms, right? It's got like a really big power flush and they cover their ears. That's sometimes okay. That's an occasional sound. The public restroom, the fire drill. What about the kid who won't go to birthday parties? One of my favorite little boys who I see here came to me the other day. He goes to an afternoon preschool, and he said to me, "It's going to be my friend's birthday this afternoon. I'm going to cry when they sing happy birthday." Okay, he knew it was coming, and he was afraid of it. And for him, part of it is the anticipation of it. And I actually spoke to his mom about the Halloween. She was class mom. I spoke to his mom about the Halloween party afterwards, and a lot of it was the fear that he had set up ahead of time, but he functioned better when it actually happened. And there's this poor child is anxious, waiting for it to happen. And we'll discuss a little bit more of that in a few minutes. For a child who seeks movement, there's a glitch in their sense of movement, in their vestibular system. So this is a child who we frequently say has got ants in their pants. Right? The same kid who has difficulty sitting still for the duration of a lesson or keeping his space during circle time is often the kid who's standing at your dinner table rather than sitting at your dinner table. Similarly, there are children who avoid movement altogether, and these are children who avoid, that wobbly bridge on a playground, or I just had a child here the other day who absolutely loves the zip line. But to watch him is to see he is fearful. He climbs up this ladder, and he is terrified for a split second to put his hands on these rings and lean forward and have his feet leave that top rung of the ladder. And his dad is not usually here. His dad brought him, and his dad saw that incident and sees it when he takes him to the playground too. That is a child who is so motivated for this activity that he will participate in it, but you cannot miss the fact that he is petrified in that split second. He's petrified to let his foot leave that last rung. So that's a child who is avoiding many movement opportunities that come his way. When we talk about sight, there are those children who are seekers. And Chai mentioned the preschooler in the classroom whose eyes are darting all over the place, but are never settling on the teacher or on the lesson. There are also many children who avoid eye contact. And there's much ado about eye contact. And just because a child doesn't make eye contact does not make for a diagnosis. We'll just put that out there. But it's a very intense type of input, and many children cannot make eye contact, or very much they might make eye contact if nothing else is demanded of them. But they can't look at you while they're hearing, while they're also producing a motor output. And that's a child who avoids certain sensations. Talk about oral input. How many kids are chewing on their clothing? That's a very common complaint that we have. Right? Children are chewing on the cuffs of their sleeves, on their collars, chewing on their pencils, biting whatever they have around them. And similarly, many of the kids who we see have hypersensitivity in their oral system, and they're super picky eaters. Right? They have very limited diets, even for children. They won't mix two textures together. It'll be the child who puts, no sprinkles in his yogurt, even though that's appealing. They don't mix cereal and milk together because that's two textures together, right? So we have a lot of kids who also have this hypersensitivity in their oral system. And what's very tricky about a lot of the kids that we see is they can both seek and avoid at the same time, right? We have a kid who fidgets but is afraid of certain things on the playground. So what we work to do here is to find that middle ground for their best function.